I know. My name is Stacy, and I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi. My sobriety date is April the 25th of 2003. And for that, I am very grateful. My home group is the Tuesday night Big Book Study in San Antonio, Texas. If you're ever in San Antonio and you're there on a Tuesday night, please let me know that you're there. It would be an honor to take you to my home group. You can always email me at soberghost@gmail.com. That's right. And my sponsor is Sharon C. from LA. All of these things are very important to me, thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want to thank Mo for asking me to come here. I want to thank Terry for picking me up from the airport, and Kathy for taking me to dinner, and Richard for coming to lunch with Terry and I. It's just been you guys have just welcomed me in, and I've already felt at home since I've been here. And you know, it's just a matter of good sponsorship, I think, and good examples of good sponsorship that I've seen today. And John, I want to thank you for starting this meeting. It's interesting because I often get asked to speak in conventions, or I get asked to speak in anniversaries. And I was talking with Kathy on the way up here, and she said sometimes our group is known as being the Nazi group. And I thought to myself, you know, it's interesting because whenever I get invited to speak at an anniversary, it's always a Nazi group that invites me. And for a long time, I thought there must be something about my talk that attracts the Nazi groups. Now I know differently. The reality of it is, if you are a structured group that's grounded in the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, you have things like anniversaries that you invite speakers to. And you take you take this thing very seriously, and that's certainly what I see tonight. So I'm so grateful to be here. I come from a structured group myself. We are a 3 legacy group. That's how I was raised in Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe in the value of good sponsorship. I believe in the traditions and in the steps because that's what saved my life. You're going to find out very shortly that I am the type of girl that needs to be on the short leash of Alcoholics Anonymous, because left to my own devices, I don't need alcohol to burn my life to the ground. So, it's interesting, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous, I really do, and I suffer from the disease of alcoholism, which has nothing to do with when alcohol is in my system and has everything to do with when it's not. And when it's not in my system, I am restless, irritable, discontent. And when it's not in my system, I do not know how to be a part of you. I don't know how to be a daughter to my mother. I don't know how to be any of the things that I was put on this earth to do. When I read that part in the book where it says we had a new employer, I did not know how to fulfill those duties when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it has taken great leadership in my life to show me how to do that, even to this day. I met Mo I guess I met you about a year ago. We were in Havre, Montana, and guys, I got to tell you, I'm from the concrete jungle, okay? So I'm not used to a lot of wildlife. And they picked me up from the airport and started driving, and I darn near had a panic attack. There was nothing out there. It just scared me to death. I'm sure that's what somebody from out here probably experiences in the city, but I just panicked. I just absolutely had my first real panic attack in sobriety. But thank God I turned my will and my life over that morning, because it worked out okay. But while I was flying up to Havre, Montana, I was sitting in the airplane with this gentleman, and he was from Las Vegas, Nevada. And we started talking, because I always try to be friendly on the trip here. And as I was talking to him, I asked him, I said, "What are you doing in Montana?" And he said, "Well, my son's in the Air Force stationed out there, and I promised him on his 21st birthday I would buy him his first drink." And he said, "What are you doing in Montana?" Needless to say, the conversation got weird right away. And I don't know if you all have this experience, but when I'm around non-alcoholics and I tell them in AA, they always want to justify their drinking to me, which is completely not necessary. It really isn't, because I'm not mad at anybody that can still drink. If I was not alcoholic, I'm convinced I would be drunk every day. That's just how I roll. So if you're in here and you're non-alcoholic, please have 2 for me tonight. I love it. I love alcohol. I love the effect produced by it. I love everything about it. I love the scenery. I love the lights. I love the smell. My favorite perfume is by Terry Mugler. It's called Alien, and the reason I love it is because it still smells like a Vegas hooker, and I just love that. It's just wonderful. Wonderful. I'm not wearing it tonight, but I wish I had it. Anyway, that's just me. I'm grateful to be here. I was born July 16, 1977, to a Hispanic mother and a Persian father. I don't know a lot about my history. The reality of it is I'm actually still learning about my background today. But what I do know is this. My father was not an American citizen, and for whatever reason, he didn't want my mother raising me, and I don't know the circumstances behind that. He didn't feel like she would be a fit mother for me. And he knew he couldn't take me from her because he was afraid that one day he'd be deported and I'd be left in foster care. So when I was born, they made a decision in the hospital that they were going to put me up for adoption, and that's what they did. Now, the people who, I was in a foster home very short time, but the people who I call my parents are just wonderful people. My mother grew up in alcoholism. And what I know about alcoholism today is that alcoholism doesn't leave room for love. That's just not part of the equation when you're growing up in alcoholism. And what I choose to believe, because this was the example I got, is that my mother made a decision that when she had her own children, she was going to tell us that she loved us, and she was going to show us that she loved us. And that's the kind of upbringing I had. I was told that I was loved. I was shown I was loved. I went to good schools. My parents, good people, salt of the earth, both from the Midwest, working class people, worked very hard to be what they are today. And so that's how I grew up. Now, my parents gave me up for adoption in the hospital, and they told my biological family that I had died at birth. Now, I'm not telling you this to blame alcoholism on anything that is going on outside of me. I know today, because I've been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous long enough, that alcoholism has nothing to do with any circumstances outside of my being. I realize today that it's an internal condition. But I tell you that story to tell you that what I have is alcoholic perception. I don't see things right. The fact of the matter was, my parents gave me up for adoption and what they did is they gave me up for adoption so that another family could provide for me the things that they couldn't. And I know that that was a very tough decision that required a lot of self-sacrifice on their part. The feeling was that I had been thrown away by the people who should have loved me the most, and I didn't know what I had done wrong. And I carry that kind of self-centered fear all my life. It's all about me. Nobody knows it. My first sponsor used to say, it's like it's your parade and you're not even in it. I hate that. It's just, it's miserable. It's miserable. And I know this is going to sound weird in Billings, Montana, but I did not want to be Hispanic and Persian. I wanted to be something exotic, Sounds strange, but come to South Texas, everybody looks like me. So, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And there were only a few times in my childhood that I remember being made fun of. I remember being called an Iranian terrorist or a Mexican domestic. But I heard it one time, and one time is enough for an alcoholic, because I'll hear it in my head 100 times. And so I started lying about who I was. I started lying about who my parents were. Just all of that. That was my first tool for living, was lying. And I remember friends of mine would find out that I lied about things, and they wouldn't be my friend anymore, and it was just really it was drama all the time. And when you're 8 or 9 years old and you're running the world, you get tired real quick. And I didn't get a drink until I was 12, which I feel like is long enough to hold on as far as I'm concerned. I held out as long as I could, and drinking for me was a planned event. I know that's not for everybody. Some people talk about peer pressure being involved. There was none in my case. My parents had a liquor cabinet, and I had eyeballed that thing for a while. They had parties where people would come over, and I remember they drank too much alcohol, and I remember they had to take their keys and things like that. And so, I wanted to drink. It was a planned event. So I started trying to drink. I remember getting into their liquor cabinet, getting some of what they had and putting it in a bottle and taking it to middle school with me. And when I had that first drink and that first drunk simultaneously, I remember it was just an incredible experience for me. When I am not drinking, I am painfully shy. When I am not drinking, I'm comparing my insides to your outsides, and I'm coming up short. But when I am drinking, I'm in your face. You know, when I am drinking, it does something for me that nothing else could do for me. When I put alcohol in my body, I began to know a new freedom and a new happiness. I didn't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. I could comprehend the word serenity, and honey, I looked good, you know. And if you get something that does that for you, just alters your perception, it's a good thing by my standards. When I put alcohol in my body, I find that spiritual principle of whatever when I drink. And that's what I want to feel. You know, you're leaving, whatever. I didn't like you anyway. You know, they're taking the car, I'll get another one, whatever. See, that's how I want to feel, because that's not what's going on for me with no alcohol in my system. That internal condition weighs on me, and I care so much about how you feel. I want you to like me. Now, I don't like you, but I want you to like me. And so, you know, alcohol just kind of smooths things out a little bit for me, you know. And so when I found that magic of alcohol, I did, you know, what a lot of people do. I pursued it into the gates of insanity and almost death. Now, I didn't get to drink the way I wanted to at 12 years old. Very shortly after that little drinking bout, I had my first nervous breakdown, and my parents stuck me in an institution. They stuck me in an institution when I was 12 years old. I got out at 14. A little excessive, you know. But back then, they could do things like that. And so they stuck me in this institution, and I got out in June, started high school very shortly after. And I remember when I started high school, they got my transcripts, and they didn't know what to do with somebody who had come from an institution. And it wasn't a rehab. It was an institution. I didn't have a belt. I didn't have any shoelaces for over a year. But it was an interesting time in history. It was that whole No Child Left Behind thing. So what that means is that they had to graduate me. They just had to figure out a unique way to do it. So they stuck me in this program called the Challenger Program, and it was for gang members and pregnant teenagers. Now, I was neither one, but they just kind of put me in there to figure out what to do with me. And they gave me this little gift. What they gave me is this wooden hall pass. It said pass. And they said, whenever you feel like you're going to freak out, just show it to the instructor, and they'll let you leave, no questions asked. Now, that is a beautiful thing if you're an alcoholic, because when my drink alarm would go off, I just kind of just show the pass and leave, you know, and say, I gotta go, and they'd let me go. Now, I wasn't supposed to just run down the street screaming. What I was supposed to do is check in with this counselor who was on campus. Her name is Lorraine Grant. I'm still looking for her because I owe her an amends. And so I would show up to her office and sit there, and I remember she'd try to help me, you know, try to work on whatever was going on in my life. And I was just so far removed from everything. I hid behind a wall of condescending remarks and sarcasm. And she would try desperately and patiently to try to talk to me and get through to me. And I'd say these inappropriate remarks. One time she asked me about how I got along with my mother, and I'd say things like, oh, I'm thinking about killing her and burying her in the backyard. You know, I wore combat boots, I dressed in all black, I had a mohawk. I was not a vision for you. It was just a little hot mess. And, you know, they tried as best they could with that one, and that didn't work out. So after a short time, they came to me and they said, if you get a job and you show us your paycheck stubs, we will graduate you from high school. So that's what I did. I got a job. I robbed the first one. That's a whole nother story. But then I got another one, and showed my paycheck stubs for about a year and a half, and they graduated me from high school with a 6th grade education. So at 17 years old, I went off to college, certainly not on my transcripts. I'm a little bit of an artist by trade, and through submitting my portfolio, I was accepted to Kansas City Art Institute in Kansas City, Missouri under a scholarship, which is a very big honor in the art world for any of you that are familiar. There were people on that campus from England and from Thailand. Some of the top students in the nation were there. And I was so privileged to be there. If ever there was a time when straightening up and flying right would have been the deal, I wish it would have been then. If there was any power, or in the power of choice, if that was present in my life, that would have been the time when I would have said no and I would have cleaned up my life. But what would happen to me is when I would walk off that campus and I would take a drink, I did not care that I was a student at Kansas City Art Institute. And long or the short, they kicked me out before the first semester, pulled my scholarship and sent me home. And my parents asked me what happened, and I said I made a mistake. I met a man. His name is Morgan David. That's Mad Dog 2020 for you classy people. And I drank too much, and I demolished one of their statues. I threw up all over it, and they didn't think that was cute. And I told my parents I will never do that again. No clue I'm in trouble with alcohol. So I come home and I'm 17 years old, and one of my greatest fears is that I cannot take care of myself. There's not going to be enough money. There's not going to be enough food. Who's going to help me? How am I going to survive? And I can give you a lot of excuses, but at 17 years old, I got a fake ID and I got into the topless bar industry. I got in at 17, I got out at 25. I got sober at 25. So that gives you a little picture of who walked in the rooms when I came in here. Thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous that you all allowed me to take my seat, that you didn't tell me I had to dress appropriately or clean up my language to sit amongst you. It was the last house on the block for me. And when you see that little girl in there that's hustling people in your home group, be nice to her. She might be your next anniversary speaker. So that was just me in a nutshell. That was me. And so, you know, I'm not going to talk bad about that business because I know there are women in that business that do the right things. They actually feed their kids, they go to college, they come home at night. What I will tell you is I'm not that kind of woman. I'm an alcoholic woman. I wreck shop. You give me a little bit of power, what I think is a little bit of money, and I become a tornado roaring through the lives of others. It was like Bill talked about in his story. When he said those words, I had arrived. That was it for me. I had a 6-figure income. I was under the age of 20, and I was a brat. But towards the end of my drinking, not the business, but I robbed me of every bit of self-respect and dignity that I had as a woman, because even when alcohol would ask for my dignity, I would trade that over, no questions asked. We talk about those 7 things in the 4th step: self-esteem, pride, ambitions, personal relations, sex relations. That business catered to all of those things. And I just felt like I couldn't be touched, but you know, it does that. Alcohol does what it does. It turns like a boomerang and all but cuts me to ribbons. And so things gradually just got worse. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had been arrested several times. I learned in AA, if you've been arrested more than 3 times, all you have to say is several. So for the record, I've been arrested several times. I've also been institutionalized several times. I don't know, man. It's just what I do. It's just one day at a time. That's how I live, and it just seems normal to me. But I had no clue about being in relationships either. I'm a little bit of a hostage taker. I don't know if there's any other hostage takers in the room tonight. Hey, girl. But this is kind of how it works for me. I feel like if we talk for like 30 minutes and it goes well, we're in love, And I'm always looking for a soulmate, He likes chocolate ice cream. I like chocolate ice cream. We're match in heaven, right? And so I met this old boy when I was working at the club. He was a DJ, so we had something in common, and we talked for 30 minutes, and it went well. And as I got to know him, I found out that there were other things that we had in common, me and this old boy. Turned out that we talked the same, we drank the same, and we lied the same. And I know the drill. I mean, when you find somebody like that, you get your claws on him. You don't want your girlfriends to get him. So I got my hooks in this guy and moved in right away. You can allow your imagination to go as far as you want to about what 2 actively drinking alcoholics looks like. To quote a friend of mine, our love was so big we had to take it outside. We had that kind of love. We had that big love. I remember Christmas time, one of us, I think it was him, but he threw the Christmas tree out the door. It was like, I hate you. I hate you too. We're always just, And the reason we stayed together as long as we did is because both of us swore that we were going to leave the other one once we sobered up. Which did not happen, consequently, for me for a long time. When I was 23 years old, I became pregnant. I know that most women, when they find out they're pregnant, they're excited, they feel the movement of the baby in their stomach, and they're happy. That was not my experience. My experience was that I didn't know how I was going to stay sober for 9 months, and I certainly didn't want any child to have a mother like me. And to be very honest with you, I saw that child as something that was going to ruin my life, because it was going to destroy the only thing that made me worthwhile in this world, and that was my body. And it was going to trap me where I had to put up with a man that I knew was the problem, and I hated him. And I didn't want to be tied to him for the rest of my life, because all I would do is just lay in bed and think to myself, once I get away from him, my life is going to be fine. And so I made a decision that I was not going to have that child, and I lied about it. And when he found out, he left me, and I thought to myself, oh, good, because now I'm going to get my life back together. And I don't know how you do it, but when I get my life back together, I buy an outfit. you know. I do. I just buy a nice kind of little fancy outfit like I got on tonight with some control top pantyhose, because you got to keep it right and tight, you know. And so I'm thinking I'm going to get my act together, and it's going to be like nice, because I'm going to meet a real man, and he's going to take care of me, and we're just going to have that dream life together. And that's not what happened. What happened is I continued to sell my dignity over and over and over again until I started breaking my own rules in the club. I was warned very early on when I started that business. They said, don't ever go home for a price, because as soon as you have a price on your head, you'll always have a price, and it'll just get lower and lower, and that's what happened. The price just got lower and lower and lower. It's a slippery slope out there. It's always tough the first time you have to do something. The first time you get arrested is always very demoralizing. The second time, it's like I'm yelling at them because they violated my Miranda rights. I know the drill. It's always scary the first time you get put in an institution. The second and third time, I've got my shoelaces off, I got my belt off, and I'm looking for a date the first day. And see, because it's a slippery slope out there, because I know what I was doing before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, the reason why I stay with you some days when it seems like what else is there, I stay with you because I know that whatever I was doing before I came in here will be easier the second time. And because I've been with you long enough, you have given me a thing called morals. You have given me a psychic change. And I know all it's going to do is just crush me the next time. So gradually things get worse. I'm going to tell a few stories, and I'm going to sober up because I love these stories. I really do. It reminds me of who I was when I was out there drinking. But more importantly, it reminds me of who I can be if I leave you, because after all we have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. It's one day at a time. We were talking about it at the table tonight. What I did yesterday is not going to sustain me for today. But I'm an alcoholic, you know, and I wreck shop, and, you know, I'm full of fear, and it's me against the world, and I don't measure up. And the way I deal with those feelings is I like to act real tough. I do. I like to act tough, because I don't like you asking me questions, because I feel like I'm not going to have the answer, and I'm going to look stupid. Clancy always talked about there is one emotion that is probably far deeper painful than any other one, and that is public embarrassment. To be exposed for the weak human being that I think I am. And I protected myself at all costs against that, and I would act like a real tough guy. So one time I was out drinking and driving, and long story short, I drove my car directly into an on-duty ambulance. Now, I told y'all I don't like to look stupid, which is kind of hard to do when you hit a public vehicle with its lights on. So the EMT comes and he knocks on my window. This is me without you, Alcoholics Anonymous. I rolled down the window and I said, what? He said, ma'am, do you realize you just plowed into an on? And I said, yeah, I know. What? What? Now, see, I can't act bad in the car. I get out of my car and I'm screaming at this guy. Now, mind you, I hit him, but I'm not going to let it go, you know. So they call the police and I go to jail one more time behind hitting a public vehicle. Gradually, things get worse. I used to have a little bit of an anger problem, right? Shocking, I know. Guys would come into the club and they would say disrespectful things to me, and as a woman of dignity and grace, I felt like I needed to let them know I don't appreciate that. So, you know, I throw a drink on them. One time I hit a guy, and anyway, long and the short, they started finding this correlation between how much I drank and my little temper tantrums, and the club banned me from drinking. Exactly. Mo, exactly. I said, I felt the same way. See, I had been nowhere near Al-Anon, Cindy, but I already knew you don't take alcohol away from an alcoholic without, you know, something. That's all I knew. You just don't take it away. That's just wrong, right? So I proceeded to tell him that. I said, look, you cannot expect me to do this and not drink. You know, I have to have something. I can't not drink. Well, they did it. And when alcohol is not in my system, I start to go crazy. That knot in my stomach just gets tighter and tighter, and I feel like it's just painful to take a breath. And when I get to the end of the street and I can't remember if I'm going to take a left or a right, I break out in sweats and I just freak out. And I know I need to go. I don't know where I need to go, but I need to go. And it was just on me, and that madness was just on me, and I couldn't do it anymore, and so I started finding some of those outside issues. Now I'm going to show my respect for Alcoholics Anonymous because I believe in singleness of purpose, but if you put pills in my hand, I don't ask dumb questions like, oh, what's this going to do to me and stuff like that. You know, I'm a simple kind of girl. I don't complicate things, you know. And so one night I couldn't get these normal outside issues that I get, so I got these other outside issues. And I remember I took a whole bunch of them, and the room started spinning, and I knew I needed to leave. And I told my boss I need to go, and I remember walking outside the club, and all I saw was the light of day, and that's all I remember. I woke up in University Hospital, that's our county hospital in San Antonio, with people standing over me with surgical masks on, and I know that the night is not going my way. I asked them what happened. I said, did I do anything? Did I hit somebody? Please tell me, did I kill someone? And they said, we cannot tell you anything. All we can tell you is that the police are waiting for you outside, and you need to check in with them when you leave. And so I didn't check in with the police that night. So at this point in my story, I'm on the run. Gradually, things get worse. I'm going in and out of hospitals at this point. I'm going in and out of jails. I'm going in and out of institutions. Sometimes I'm going to institutions because I'm drinking too much, but most of the time it's because I'm not drinking at all. And I'm asking them what's wrong with me. I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to voluntarily commit myself to these places. I'm giving them everything that I got and saying I'm not safe. You need to put me in here for at least 42 hours, 72 hours, something. You need to put me away, because if you put me out there, I'm going to be a danger to myself or someone else. And they're giving me all these diagnoses, and they're giving me all these pills. I used to have a pill box the size of my home group's chip box, right? And we got a lot of old timers, you know. And I'm taking all these pills, and I'm just shuffling around. I'm taking pills 4 or 5 times a day, and things are not getting any better. And so what I did is I just took pills, and I drank, and I slept, and I'd get up and I'd go to work, and I'd eat, and I'd sleep, and I'd drink. That's all I did for about a year, and I started gaining a bunch of weight. I gained about 64 pounds. And I was not showering. I was not changing my clothes. I wore the same velour jumpsuit for about a month. It was pink. I thought I looked like J-Lo. I didn't. Alcohol had completely repossessed my looks, and I became unemployable for the kind of work I do, which, you know, in my book, that's pretty low, you know, I'm just saying. And so I did what somebody like me does, because I got full of fear again, and I thought I'm not going to be able to take care of myself. And so there was this guy that was in my life. I don't know what was going on in his poor life that he thought a girl who wore the same jumpsuit for a month was a little bit of all right. But he did, and I set the deal up. I said, look, you like me. I think I can like you. I'm going to move in with you. You're going to take care of me, and I'm going to be good. 2 out of 3 happened, I'm just saying. It all ended for me one more time, going to county hospital, this time dead on arrival. This is not my worst day. I need to tell you that I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous because of the consequences of my drinking. Richard and I were talking about this today. Consequences mean nothing to a girl like me. It's always frightening the first time you have to do something. It's always easier the second time. Y'all talk about incomprehensible demoralization. I need to tell you that I lived there one day at a time. I did not come to Alcoholics Anonymous because of the consequences of my drinking. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. I go to jail, I go to an institution, and something would happen, and people go, well, maybe that'll wake her up. Nuh-uh, honey. No. Not for somebody like me, because I know I'm crazy, and I know I've been dealt a bad hand in life, and this is just the direction we're going. It sucks, but it's my life, and that's the best I can hope for. Incomprehensible demoralization. What happened to me is that what happened to me was this. I woke up in University Hospital. MHMR was standing there. Now, y'all don't know who that is, but it's a Texas state mental health organization that if you ever have to get involuntarily committed to a hospital, they send an assessor out there, they ask you a bunch of questions, they get a judge to sign the paperwork, and you're going. And what had happened was they were trying to commit me on a suicide attempt. Now, guys, I had not tried to kill myself. I just drank too much. The book talks about a sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. See, towards the beginning of my drinking, I was getting that sense of ease and comfort. But in the end of my drinking, I was restless, irritable, discontent, and drunk. And if you've ever been at that place where your body is so drunk that you cannot stand up, but your mind is as clear as a bell, where there is not enough alcohol, there is not enough pills, there is not enough outside issues or love from anyone that is going to wipe the looks off their face. I would drink all day, and all I saw was them looking at me. And that guilt and that shame was on me. And alcohol had stopped working. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, this old boy told me, he said, if you have crossed that line, that's the line that we talk about. when it no longer when it no longer works for you, Stacy. He said, and for an alcoholic like you, if it's no longer working, you're going to have to find a program and a spiritual awakening, honey, or you're going to get a gun at the pawn shop. And I understood exactly what he meant, because I had been shopping around for quite a while. Restless, irritable, discontent, and drunk. I remember the lady from MHMR standing there with a box of everything that I had drank and everything that I had taken that morning, and she said, it's all empty. Are you telling me, lady, that you were not trying to kill yourself? And I said, look, I was just trying to feel better. Will you leave me alone? And I looked to the right, and my father was standing there. And I had done the best I could at what I thought was living that double life, trying to keep them out of the loop. I need to tell you that my father was on the board of that hospital. And it was not me that called him. I still don't know to this day who saw his kid show up in that condition and had to pick up the phone and say, your daughter's dying, you need to come down here. But that is exactly how it happened. And I remember saying to him over and over again, I am so sorry. I never wanted you to see this. And he said to me, Stacy, I'm sorry because I can't help you. And he walked out of my room, and I'd love to tell you that that's the last time I drank. But even though it wasn't even working, I just couldn't stop. That poor old boy that I had taken hostage, I was having him bring me stuff to the hospital because I needed to relax. I'm a product of an intervention, but not like the ones you see on TV. My mom had been going to Al-Anon for a little while. And if you are in this room and you're in Al-Anon, I need to tell you that I love you. You saved my mother's life, and you saved mine in the process. She walked into my hospital room and she said, you get some help or we are prepared to walk away from you. And I know that the spirit of Al-Anon was with her, because for the first time, I believed her. My mom is not the type of person who can do that. That is a power greater than her working through her. My mom's the type that whenever I used to ask her when we were kids, I said, Mom, what do you want for Christmas? She'd go, I just want everybody to get along. That's my mom, man. That's my heart, though. I love my mother, man. But my mom can't do that. Not without a program of action. And so Al-Anon working in her life saved mine. April 25th of 2003, I was driven up to the hill country, and that is my sobriety date. Now, the treatment center did their job. They separated me from alcohol for the last time, and if you're anything like me, things don't get better. I started going crazy in that place. But they started talking to me about alcoholism. Not the way you talk to me, but the way they talked to me is they opened a door for me. And the door that they opened was a door in my mind that for an alcoholic of my type, the only solution would be Alcoholics Anonymous. They said, when you get out of treatment, don't unpack, don't go on a trip, don't go get you another boyfriend. That's okay. I had 3 of them. Treatment center was full of them. And I know I'm not the only one. So they said, They said, go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and get a sponsor and start working the steps, because clearly your life depends on it. And they suggested that I go to a halfway house. Now, that's not a part of Alcoholics Anonymous, but when you have nowhere to live, that's where you go. So I moved into this halfway house. It was 2 stories high. There were 18 women, 2 bathrooms. It was bizarre, man. I mean, not because of them, but because of me. See, I had missed some of those little tools in life, like cleaning. Never done that before. And I remember they taught me how to clean. They put a mop in my hand, and I remember they told me to put some soap on it and some water. And they told me to move the mop to the left. And then they said, move it back to the right. I was up there mopping in stiletto heels. I was like, girl, this is crazy. But I know how to mop today. I showed up to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My home group was the world-famous home group of 2211 in Kerrville, Texas, where I met Frank Sullivan. And there was this old boy in my home group, He was a little famous out in the Houston area. His name was Frank F. And he was famous because he got in a fist fight with another member of AA in the parking lot of the AA meeting over who had the most serenity. I know. Sometimes we see our members' conduct and we go, oh, that's not a good example of Alcoholics Anonymous. See, I need to tell you, I identified with Frank. Me and Frank were like this. We understood each other. I got it. I totally got it. I said, right on, Frank. I met the woman who was to become my idol in sobriety. Her name is Gail S., who got sober out in Tyler, Texas. Her and her husband are 31 years sober apiece. She is 3 more days sober than he is. I hope wherever you go to meetings, you got heroes. I had the wrong kind of heroes when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and Gail became my hero. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever met. just beautiful on the inside and on the outside. She was just gorgeous. And I remember she'd just walk in, and it's like she just glowed God, you know. And she kind of just look at me, and she'd sort of sashay over into my direction. And that sweet little voice, she'd say to me, "Baby, let me tell you something." And I'd say, "Yes, Miss Gail." And she'd say, "For God's sake, honey, get your toes done." And then she'd just walk off. Now, see, I need to let y'all know, Billings, I have my toes done today, which is a tribute to Gail S. See, I always wanted what she had, but I never knew what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it, you know. I can today. Gail is as beautiful on the inside as she is on the outside, and that is all I've ever wanted to be. I always thought if you straighten out the outside that somehow the inside will clean up, and that is not my experience. This program is an inside job. My friend Candace M. out in LA always says, if you do not go within, you will go without in this program. It is an inside job. If you don't take the steps to go within, you will absolutely miss the bus, honey. It's an inside job. And so Gail was my idol, and I just follow her around. I still do to this day. Now, I need to tell you, my first sponsor was Annie M. in Kerrville, Texas, who got sober in the suburban group of Austin, Texas. I am a product of mean sponsorship. Really am. You know, Annie she was just a tough old bird. Now, Nancy B. from Denton, Texas gave me the greatest description of a mean sponsor. She said, it's someone who cares more about what you're doing than how you're feeling. See, Annie didn't care about how I felt. She said, I don't care how you feel. The point is, do you not want to feel that way anymore? Because in order to focus on the solution, we got to get away from the problem. And Annie just did that for me. She just walked me through things. But she was also a little mean, I'm not going to lie. You know, because I was new, right? I was still not showering. I was still carrying a lot of weight from back when I was on medication. But since I was new, I knew I looked good, right? It is a disease of perception, you know. And I was just convinced that despite the fact I still wasn't showering and changing my clothes like I was supposed to when I was new, I just knew that every man in my home group had just regretted the fact that they got married before I walked in the room. I'm telling you, I will see it however I want to see it. Even to this day, I'm telling you, like if I think I need to lose 10 pounds, I'll get on the treadmill for 30, I get off, I think I've lost 20. And I can look in the mirror and I can see it. You know, I'm like, ooh, girl is looking right and tight, you know. But that's not reality. It's just my problem. That's why I stay with you. So, you know, because of that fact, Annie had this way of, she just dropped these little one-liners and she just kind of punctured my ego. That's just her. So one time I was in Walmart with her and, you know, we were in the aisle with the candles with the saints on them? I mean, you know how good they look, right? You know, they've got the light around them and holding the heart of Jesus, you know. I was looking at them and I thought, I would look good on one of those saint candles. I mean, you can see it, right? You know, and Annie didn't miss a beat. She said, yeah, you can be the saint, you can be the patron saint of mental patients and fallen women. I thought, see, now that's just rude. Rude. I'm not going to talk to her anymore. Till the next tragedy, of course, you know, and I'd be like, Annie, I messed up. Sponsorship is very important. Johnny H. used to say, it's monkey see, monkey do. Just make sure you're following the right monkey. It's important. And see, Annie didn't just teach me she didn't just take me through the steps. Annie taught me how to live in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I believe if you can live in here, you will survive out there. It's not the other way around, you know. Every good idea I've ever had, I learned it in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was taught to be on time. Where I come from, that's 10 minutes early, and I was taught to stay late. I was taught to take a commitment. I was taught to reach my hand out and shake hands with newcomers. I was taught to take care of the house. And no matter where I speak in any part of the country, I go home and I take care of the house. That's my home group. I was taught to have a home group. I filled out my first job application sober. I hadn't had honest work before I got here. I was, you know, everything that you all have taught me, I was taught to dress appropriately and watch my language. Now, granted, I'm wearing some really extra tight pantyhose tonight, and I'm not very happy about it. But I did that because my sponsor told me to, and when I do what she says, I get well. So I'm a sufferer. So, the most important part is that Annie did open the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and take me through the 12-step process. And as the 12-step process started taking place in my life, what happened to me is what it describes in the back of the book, Appendix 2, Spiritual Experience, where it says the personality change sufficient to overcome alcoholism occurred. See, of and by myself, I cannot make that take place. I am the queen of New Year's resolutions, and they last about 3 weeks, and then I'm back to doing me. And I know in here me is not enough. I believe that the woman who walked in here on April 25th of 2003 will always drink again. And I know I can't be her. I don't want to be her. But see, of and by myself, I don't know how to let that take place. But what I was taught is that the 12 steps, the purpose of the 12 steps is to shrink my ego down small enough to experience the Spirit. Or have a spiritual experience, however you want to say it. Now, yes, I had a problem with the God thing. I love that line in the book where it says to be doomed in alcoholic death or to live life on a spiritual basis are not easy alternatives to face. I work with a lot of women today, and that's what they're struggling with. They come to me all the time, and they say, God, honey. And I say, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's exactly why they titled that chapter, We Agnostics, not those darn agnostics. We're all a little bit agnostic, honey. And I'll explain. Anytime I'm afraid, what I believe is that God is not big enough to handle this, and that is agnostic. That's always the problem. Whenever I'm getting tangled up around here, that's the problem. One more time, I have to examine my agnosticism. Do I believe that I can be restored to sanity, soundness of mind? Do I believe that my life can be different, no matter what the problem is? Do I believe that God can take me beyond where I am today? Yes, I had a problem with the God thing. Absolutely. When I was 12 years old and they put me in that institution, I remember I called my parents every single day. I would say, please come get me, please come get me, please come get me. I was the youngest kid on the unit, and there are things that happened to a 12-year-old in there that should not have happened. I went in there very innocent, and when I came out, I was entirely different. One of the biggest envies I had when I started sponsoring people in Alcoholics Anonymous is that I would get these girls that asked me to sponsor them, and they were so naive. And what I resented about them is that they were innocent, and I felt like I had come in here with nothing. So I was in that hospital, and I would call my parents every day, please come get me, please come get me, please come get me. And they took the direction of a psychiatrist. In all fairness to them, they didn't come. They saw their kid just falling apart in front of them, and they did what they thought was the best thing to do at that time. And when it hit me that they were not coming, something broke inside of me. I know today that was my spirit. And I remember I was laying in that hospital bed, and I was wide awake, and I'm telling you this exactly the way it happened. I saw an angel standing at the foot of my bed. I remember she was very tall, she was in a blue dress, she was completely transparent, and when I saw her, a peace came over me like I've never experienced in my life. And I remember I reached out to touch her, and she completely disappeared. Spiritual experience, you bet. But I made a mistake. I told the psychiatrist about it the next morning. And I remember they raised my medication level through the roof, y'all. I think it was like a week later, they were like, so have you seen any angels? I was like, no. She's gone. See, I learned something. I was like, don't tell people stuff like that, right? You know, I can tell you because I know you understand. Spiritual experience, you bet. But what it tells me in the book is that what I need to have is a spiritual awakening. And there's a big, vast difference between it. I've had spiritual experiences, drunk or sober. What it is it's that overwhelming experience like I want to celebrate life. I get it a lot at rock concerts. Last month I was out there watching Carlos Santana, and you know when Carlos puts the light on him and the bass guitarist starts going and all the Bic lighters go up, now there's cell phones. I'm like, yeah. Like, ain't no better time than now, there ain't no better place than here. But back in the day, I still went and got a six-pack to celebrate, you know. But that is an experience. It asked me to have an awakening, and the definition of the word awakening is just that, to be completely awake and aware. My friend Doug D. from Houston, Texas always says, when I woke up this morning, I saw the ceiling for the first time. But it was not that the ceiling wasn't there while I was asleep. It was that I became awake to the ceiling. And what happened to me is that I came to Alcoholics Anonymous so far removed from anything spiritual, and what you all told me is if I take these spiritual steps, that the process will yield the results. And as a result of working all 12 steps in my life, what happened to me is that I became awake and aware of the presence of a loving God that had been there the whole time. It was that I became awake to it. And I have never been the same since. Now, have I been relieved of self-centeredness and selfishness? No. That is a daily reprieve, my friends. And as I told you earlier, I'm a short leash kind of girl. My sponsor promised me that if I stayed active in Alcoholics Anonymous and I was willing to say yes to any service commitments, and we were talking about that at the table earlier, my belief is if you want really good quality sobriety, carry the message once a week to a place that you don't want to end up. She told me, be very active in Alcoholics Anonymous, say yes to any request, and carry the message to places that you don't want to end up. And what she promised me is that many amazing things were going to happen to me in between meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Remember how I told y'all that I lived in that halfway house? Well, when I was about a year sober, I got to run that halfway house. I got to teach women how to mop. I remember going to my home group because I was, I'd gotten well at this point, and I was showering. And I went to my home group and I complained on those little girls. I said, they're not acting right. And this woman came up to me after the meeting and she said, well, darling, why don't you give them the right to be new for about 5 minutes? We've tolerated you for 5 years. And I thought, well, you got a point. Well, after I ran that halfway house, one of the things that was really instrumental in that halfway house, where I got sober, there was only one woman's halfway house. We had a 22-girl waiting list, and a lot of women went home with nowhere to live because we just didn't have the beds. Well, we were able to start several women's halfway houses opening, and in Kerrville now there's about 6 or 8 operating at any given time, and women have a place to go, and it was kind of cool to be a part of that. When I was about 2 years sober, I went and worked at the Kerrville State Hospital. When I was 3 years sober, I went and worked in a treatment center. I used to say I only have to work in Bexar County Jail. I will have worked everywhere I've lived. See, I believe that the God of my understanding doesn't throw anything away. I used to ask my sponsor, when am I going to forgive myself? When am I going to heal for all those memories that I wish I had been in a blackout, but I wasn't? There were times when I would be sitting there and a memory would flash before my eyes and it would just knock me to the ground. It was so painful I felt like I couldn't take another breath. And my sponsor kept reminding me of that third step prayer, which I said that I had turned my will and my life over, and it meant that my life now has meaning. It meant that it is none of my business. If I have taken the third step, it means I don't know a good day from a bad day, a tragedy from a miracle. Sometimes the worst things that have happened to me have turned out to be the best, and sometimes the best have turned out to be the worst. I don't know. I judge it wrong. But I was told that if I was willing to share those stories with another person to help them recover, that the pain would divide it in half. That the pain would divide in half and divide in half and divide in half until there was nothing left. The reason I can tell you all the stories that I tell you behind this podium today is because none of them own me today, thanks to a program called Alcoholics Anonymous. I am free. And you can give this tape to anybody and they can call me and they can ask me about it, and I'll tell you, I do not feel like I need to apologize for my own 2 feet of space. And to me, that's the freedom from the bondage of self, to be unburdened by selfishness and self-centeredness. I got to meet my biological father in sobriety. One of the things that I had told you all was that I had been thrown away by the people who should have loved me the most, and I didn't know what I had done wrong. And I was sitting there, and I was about 3.5 years sober, and I was talking to my mother in her kitchen. And I remember she telling me, she's like, when are you going to talk to Ali? When are you going to call Ali? That's my father. Now, what I had conveniently forgot, because when I don't understand things, I don't know about anybody else, but I tell myself stories, right? Kind of make some stuff up. And it usually involves me dying or something, always tragedy and some drama like Shakespeare. But I had told myself the story that they had just thrown me away, that they had totally forgotten about me. What I had forgot is that my father sent me letters my entire life. And he would say in the letters, I'm not going to force you to meet me, but if you ever want to meet me, I would love to have a relationship with you. But see, I had forgotten that because I was too busy with the other story, And my mom said, when are you going to call him? And I said, Mother, I have you. I'm fine. I have you and Dad. I'm good. I don't need parents. I love you. And I don't need anybody. And she said, well, Stacy, maybe he needs you. See, and I didn't even think about it from that perspective. And so I talked to my sponsor, and she said I owed him an amends. And so I sat down with my mother, and I said, I need to find him. And I said, I don't know how. How am I going to find this man? She said, I don't know, Stacy. But in 1983, he called here asking about you, and he left a phone number. Why don't you call those people? Because he's in Dripping Springs, which is a very small town. Maybe they'll know him. Maybe they can help you get connected with him. And so I dialed the number, and he picked up the phone. Now, I told you that old story, and I need to tell you the new story. The new story is this. My father never moved, and he never changed his number for 30 years. When I was 16 years old, he bought a Volkswagen Bug, and he fixed it up in case I needed a car, and he didn't sell it until I was 23. One of the most spiritual questions I've ever been asked in Alcoholics Anonymous is it possible you might be wrong? And I'm here to tell you I've never felt so good about being wrong in my life. It has been tough. My dad and I met each other for the first time when I was 30, and we've been building a relationship. I just spent last week in Thanksgiving with him. One of my aunts came over from overseas, from Tehran, and I met her for the first time. And I need to give all that credit to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I do not know how to be a daughter to my father without you. I do not know how to be a niece to my aunt without you. I need your example. This is all like just new territory for me. I'm just navigating it the best I can. But Alcoholics Anonymous gave me that. Now, I have met my mother. I need to tell you that, and we do not have a good relationship. And I have a huge part in that equation. I've done the best I can to make the amends, and I realize that she has a lot of pain in her life around the decisions that she made. And I'm going to give her the space that she needs, and I'll keep putting my side of the bridge down, and if ever we can meet in the middle, that would be wonderful. But Alcoholics Anonymous, what you have given me is that I didn't have to have her to be okay. What I could do is go in there and try to be of service and ask her if there was anything I could add to her life. And that's still what I'm willing to do today. We'll just see how it unfolds. I trust God entirely with the outcomes. I really do. So I had a couple of old ideas, and I'm going to share them with you. Eddie used to tell me, if you've thought it before, it's an old idea. Well, that just about sums it up. I had this old idea that I was not school material. Before I got sober, I had been kicked out of several universities. The very last one was a little junior college in San Antonio. I had tried to get an associate's degree, and 9 years later, I still didn't have it, you know. I mean, it's tough. I was busy. I was drunk. I had things to do. And I just never got that degree. And I just, you know, I had a 6th grade education. That's all I knew. And so I realized I was not college material. When I was about 2.5 years sober, my stepfather, who only knew me when I was active in my disease, came to me and he said, look, I know you love the state hospital. You're happy there, but you're too smart to be doing what you're doing. I want you to do something for me. I want you to go to a college. I want you to fill out an application and get as many scholarships as you can, and I'll pay for the rest. And I said, sure. Because, okay, I've been kicked out of several universities. You know what I'm saying? I don't think I'm quite on the dean's prospect list. And scholarships, I knew that wasn't happening either. So I was more than willing to do this, because I knew I was going to be able to, you know, come and tell him that I did that, and it didn't work out, and we're all good, you know. So I showed up at Shriner University in Kerrville, Texas, and I showed up in a T-shirt and some torn jeans, and I said, yeah, I want to come to your school. What do I need to do? And they handed me an application. They said, take it home, type it out, make it look neat, and have someone edit it. I said, that will not be necessary, ma'am. So I took a little pen, and I filled it out real quick, and I handed it back to her, and I said, now what else do you need? And she said, $25 to process. I said, I got that right here. I said, now what do you need? And she said, I need your transcripts from any colleges that you have attended prior to this. I said, all of them? She said, yes, all of them. So I went home and made a few phone calls. They sent my transcripts out, and I forgot totally about it. And one day I was at the state hospital, and I got a phone call from the admissions office. And they said they needed me to come down and sign some paperwork. And I said, why? Because I'm thinking, you know, I'm not going to sue you. I understand. Like, you don't need to make me sign nothing to say I'm not going to go after you. I understand why you're not going to admit me. And I kept asking her, I said, what is this about? Like, I can't take a day off just for paperwork. So you need to tell me what you need, hon. And she said, well, we got your transcripts, all of them. She said, we've never seen anything like this before. You had 11 A's, 2 B's, 14 D's, 10 F's, and 9 W's. She said, and frankly, your D's and your F's and your W's do not transfer. You have a 3.83 GPA. And you're eligible for the presidential scholarship. And I said, so what I hear you saying is you're thinking about admitting me to your college. And she said, we don't give people scholarships that are not coming in the fall. So I got all excited, and I jumped in my car. I took the day off, and I drove to the admissions office, and I couldn't get out of the car. See, I don't know how to let life be good. I don't know how to accept the abundance that God has for me. It took me a long time to be comfortable with anything good coming my way. Because, you know, when you do something nice for me, all I think about is that I'm that scandalous kid that would have taken your watch if you had looked the other way. So I'd rather you just don't. You know what I mean? Just don't do anything nice for me. And that's just kind of how I live. I like a simple life. I just want to pour coffee, shake hands with newcomers. That's good enough for me. And I sat in my car and I cried. And I said, God, I can't do this. I appreciate you. And I know I'm not supposed to tell you what to do. But you messed up. You know, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm the one who hurt your kids. I'm the one who did all of those terrible things. This is very nice, but you need to give it to someone else. And I heard a voice in my head that said, I am not doing this for you. And I guess that was just enough for me. I got out of the car and I signed the paperwork, and I thought maybe one day I'm going to be able to tell somebody, if you have an old idea, you might be wrong. It's possible that I could do this. And so I signed the paperwork, and oh, what a journey it's been. In 2007, I walked the stage with a bachelor's degree. And in 2010, I walked the stage again with a master's. I am currently a third-year doctoral candidate at UTSA. It's interesting because every Monday night, I'm at a podium like this, and I teach class. 40 students that are staring at me like you are. And what a far cry that is from where I came from. When I applied for the doctoral program, they told me they accept about 200 applications per year, and they narrow it down to 20 to interview, and they'll accept 8 for the year. And I was one of those 8. A friend of mine said, it makes no sense to me why you're out there. And I said, it makes total sense to me. Because Tom I told me, when I told him, I don't know if I can do this school thing, he told me, he said, Stacy, when it's God's will, the wall comes down. And that's what it's been in my life. Now, granted, they have no idea who they have out there. I'd appreciate it if y'all just didn't tell them. You know. They're much better left in the dark. They really are. And I'm currently in dissertation, which is kind of weird. I sit in classes all the time, in research classes, because that's what I do. I'm a researcher now. And they talk about stuff, and I need to tell you, I don't know what they're talking about. Like, they keep talking about this slope of the line. I don't know what that is. If anybody knows, y'all can tell me after the meeting, because I Googled it. You know, they don't talk about that at the Challenger program. So I don't know what's going on there. Like, I am not prepared for what I'm doing. I don't even know why I speak behind the podium all over the country. But I've been told it's none of my business. I've been told that God doesn't choose the qualified. He qualifies the chosen. Whenever I sit behind this podium, or whenever I talk to a newcomer on the phone, whenever I do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous, or even whenever I teach on Monday night, I get on my knees in the bathroom. Like Vanoy says, I get prayed up. And I say, God, please don't allow what I believe I'm capable of to stand in the way of you doing your work. And that's pretty much how I live my life today. I have to remind myself that I don't know if I'm capable of doing this or not. I just have to be willing to say yes, like I did in Alcoholics Anonymous. And what God has done for me is He has shown me gifts that I didn't know I had. So if you have an old idea, you might be wrong. You might be wrong, but the only way that old ideas are made different is through new experiences. Alcoholics Anonymous never asked me if I felt comfortable to do anything. You just told me to do it. And that's what I do. I show up. And you know what the miracle is? If you show up to college, you pass. You pass. I mean, it just works like that. I thought it was rocket science. It's not. Trust me. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And I don't know that necessarily anybody has to go back to college to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's not the case. But I do believe that in here we confront our greatest fears. Sometimes we have to walk through some of the things we are most afraid of to be an example of what God can do in our lives. And that's pretty much what I try to do today. I chose to get a degree, frankly, because I like doing it. I like proving myself wrong. That's all. I didn't have any great plans about what I'm going to do afterwards. I might end up in Montana, for God's sake. Y'all got mooses. I'm never coming here. They scare me. They're huge, I've heard. Anyway, that's a whole side note, but prior to going back to college, I had a job that I loved. People ask me what I do for a living all the time. I was a counselor. That's what I did. And they asked me where I worked, and I'm almost embarrassed to tell y'all. I worked for MHMR, okay? Whenever somebody would decompensate in the community, they would call me out there to ask them a series of questions, and I would get a judge to sign the paperwork. I have seen many people at the jumping off place, literally. We would go out all hours of the night. I've been on the side of the bridge. I've been in a hotel room where someone had a gun, when they were going to end their life. I've worked with people who are hearing voices. I've worked with a lot of people. And there have been times where I've seen one of us out there. And when I get the judge to sign the paperwork and the police officer handcuffs them and puts them in the back of the car, I try to whisper in their ear, "You don't have to live like this. Call Alcoholics Anonymous." I know that most people's lives who have encountered me in the field, it doesn't mean that their life got better because they met me. Sometimes things get worse. I know that. More than I'd like to, believe me. I've spent enough time in those hospitals to tell you life doesn't always get better. But what I try to do in their life is that I try to make a hard day a little bit easier, because that's what you did for me. You told me to keep coming back. You were kind. It was the most difficult thing for me to do, to not drink. I felt like I couldn't breathe sometimes, but your kindness kept me able to keep coming back. And that's what I try to do in the field. I'm just doing what y'all have taught me. It's not rocket science. I'm just doing what you all have taught me and what you've showed me. The last group of people that I worked with the homeless. I don't have an office. What I used to do is they didn't come to me, I went to them. If they were under the bridge, if they were in Section 8 projects, if they were living in abandoned cars, I would go out there and I would see them and I would provide services. It was such an honor to do that. I'm so humbled by my work. Just the other day, I saw one of my old clients and he said, "I have something for you." And he put a little button in my hand and it said, "No matter what the struggle is, know that you are loved." I'm so humbled by my work. It's been quite an honor, and I don't know what's ahead. I just really don't, but I'm so excited to see what happens. And I have not been locked up in an institution, gosh, in over 11 years. I know. You think that's great? I have a driver's license with my real address on it. I'm so proud of that. I'll give you one even better. Honey, I got on clean underwear today. Back in the day when they kind of got a little stale, I'd just flip them inside out. Now, I need to tell you that I haven't been arrested in about 10 and a half years. I'll tell you. So remember how I told y'all that I didn't check in with the police that night at the hospital? See, here's the great thing about the great state of Texas. You don't have to ask them what you can do to make it right. They'll come tell you. Mo knows. Girl, they came and got me. Actually, they didn't. What they did is they called me and they said, "We know where you are." This is what happens when you make people angry. They tell them where you are. I had broken up with that poor old boy, anyway. So he told them where I was, and they said, "You got 24 hours to turn yourself in or we're going to come and get you." Now, I went to my home group because I kind of felt like, I've been sober for a little while. I don't think I should have to go to jail. And nobody wrote me any letters. Nobody went to court on my behalf. What they did is they gave me a packet on how to start meetings in jail. It's my wreckage. So I turned myself in. They rolled three charges, including a failure to appear, into a felony charge. I was looking at 5 to 10. My lawyer prepared me to do some time. Now, I didn't have to do any time. I ended up on 5 years of deferred adjudication probation, where if I was to make any mistakes out there, I was going to go out and do the whole sentence. The miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous is that I forgot that I was off probation. I just wasn't paying attention. And the next thing you know, I'm like, "Oh, wow, it's October. I guess I'm off probation." It had been 5 years. I wasn't thinking about it. But, that's not what matters. It doesn't matter. On paper or not on paper, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing. What matters is I stay in the middle of the herd with you, because I am the best person that I could possibly be. I couldn't be much better than when I'm in the center of you. And that's pretty much how I try to live my life today. I just try to stay current in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it keeps getting better and better. It's not always easy. No, it's not. I can tell you a million stories about when things have gone awry, mostly of my own making. But I don't have any more time, so I'm going to close with what I normally close with. I like to close my talk with a song. Now, I'm not going to sing to you because I will not do you like that. And contrary to popular opinion, not everybody in the South sings in the choir. Anyway. So I listen to hip-hop music. I know, it's usually when it gets quiet. I'm okay with that. I do. I love hip-hop music. I always have. And there's a song by DMX. And it describes what my life is like today, thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's in the form of a prayer, so I know y'all appreciate it. And it goes something like this. It says, God, it is you who wakes me up every day. I'm forever grateful for your love. This is why I pray. You let me touch so many people, and it's all for the good. I influence so many children. I never thought that I would. And I couldn't take credit for the love that they get, because it all comes from you, God. I'm just the one that's giving it. And when it seems like the pressure gets to be too much, I take time out and pray, and I ask that you be my crutch. God, I am not perfect by a long shot, I confess to you daily. But I work harder every day, and I hope that you hear me. In my heart, I mean well, but if you'll help me to grow, then what I have in my heart will begin to show. And when I get going, I'm not looking back for nothing, because I will know where I'm headed, and I'm so tired of the suffering. I stand before you, a weakened version of your reflection, begging for direction, for my soul needs resurrection. I don't deserve what you've given me, but you never took it from me, because I am grateful, and I use it, and I do not worship money. If what you want from me is to bring your children to you, my only regret is having one life to do it instead of two. Amen. God bless you all. Thank you for my life.